Okay, first thing we need to do is to remove the cover from the machine. There's several screws that we have to take out to do that. So now we can remove the guard, which leaves us access to the Part B metering pump, which is mounted in here. Remove the Part A pump guard housing, and that allows you access into this section, which is the Part A pump. Next process will be to disconnect the accumulator from the Part B pump. What we do is we disconnect this swivel fitting here, loosen the mounting fitting here, and then we can swivel the whole accumulator backwards out of the way. So now that the swivel fitting is loosened and the top bolt is also loosened, the whole assembly can be swung away from the pump, just out of the way, so that we can get access into this complete pump assembly here. Next will be to disconnect the hose from the Part B pump outlet, so that we can completely remove the pump. Next thing to do would be to loosen the pump outlet swivel so that we can remove the non-return valve. And that leaves the pump complete here at the moment. What we need to do is to unscrew the piston rod from the drive beam. Don't move the lock nut because that's the set position of the piston. So just unwind the piston rod from the drive beam until it's fully out. Once you've loosened the piston rod, you can get a spanner just to lever the piston rod to make sure that it's actually out of the beam. The next thing to do is to remove the 4 bolts that are captivating the pump in the frame. So now that we've removed all of the 4 bolts that are keeping the pump in place, we can pull the complete pump out as an assembly. So once we have our pump complete, we can then start to service this pump. First thing to do is to remove the pump tube from the end of the pump body. In order to do this, you need to undo the grub screws that are holding the pump tube in place. There are 4 of these grub screws located around the pump. So once we've taken all of the grub screws out, we should be able to then remove the pump tube. So remove the pump tube from the end of the pump completely. That's the pump tube. The next thing to do would be to push the piston rod down so that we can reveal the piston from the end of the pump. What we do next is we will replace the nylon piston that's on the end with a new version from the service kit. So we remove the cap head screw. In order to do this, we need to extend the piston rod out the back very slightly so that the flats of the piston rod are revealed. Then we can get a spanner on the back of the piston rod so to stop the piston rod from rotating. When changing the piston, ensure that the piston backing washer is placed back on the front of the piston, and there is another one on the back of the piston just there. You can see it there. So the piston backing washer and the piston front washer. Next thing to do is to remove the rear seals from the pump. There's 2 bolts that need to be undone. Once the 2 bolts are removed, then the rear seal housing can be pulled out from the back end of the pump. In order to remove the rear seal housing, you take hold of the nailed nut and twist it out until the seal housing comes out. This will bring the piston rod out with it. Please make sure that you remove the piston from the pump front of the piston rod if it is greater than 25 millimeters. Otherwise the piston will not come back out of the rear pump assembly. Firstly, we need to look at this service kit, and we're going to concentrate today on the rear seals. So the first part we need to look at is number 8, the Y-clip seal. So the Y-clip seal has to go in a certain way where the lip points towards the piston. So we have the rear of the seal housing. You put this into the seal housing to make sure that it faces the right way. And you will see the Y-clip seal facing out towards. Once we have fitted the Y-clip seal, number 8, we can then insert the bearing, number 5, and then the chevrons, number 9, and then the rear bearing, number 5. We take the bearing, we put the bearing in first. Then we will take the chevrons. Bear in mind that the chevrons come as a front piece, and then there are 4 individual center pieces, and then there is a back piece here. Okay, so we put those together. Generally, what we do is we put them in one at a time. But you can see from here how they will be built up. So that's the complete chevron assembly that will go into the pump. Insert the chevrons into the seal housing. This is probably easier to be done one at a time, but they need to be edged in so that they go all the way down to the bottom of the seal housing. Then we take the second bearing and we put that into the pump, and we'll push that down until it sits onto the chevrons. The bearing should protrude from the rear of the seal housing by a small amount so that it can be tightened by the locking nut. The locking nut simply goes onto the back, and it will then tighten down the bearing. Only tighten this hand tight. Bear in mind that the shaft needs to go through, the piston rod needs to go through as well. Lastly, we will fit the O-ring onto the seal housing that just fits straight onto the front end of the assembly. Once you have this assembly, make sure it's nicely greased up, and then you can insert the whole assembly into the reel of the pump. So once the pump has been completely serviced, we can place it back onto the main frame of the PS20C machine. Just do everything in reverse. Basically put the pump back in section. We will tighten up the bolts underneath. We will screw the piston rod into the beam. We will fix the accumulator back onto the inlet, and we will connect the non-return valve and the hose back into the pump assembly.